105.5 WDHA here on the Jersey Magazine. I'm Jim Monahan, and my guest is Laura Gassner Otting, who is a fascinating person. Laura, I first became aware of you back in August. You were on a live stream with Kim Kaup.
Yes.
And I watched you and I thought, I got to find a way to get this woman on the air. And you sent out an email fairly recently called, "Are You Ambitious?" And I thought, that's it. That's the hook here. So as we celebrate Women's History Month, welcome to the Jersey Magazine and good morning.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here, Jim. Yeah, my newsletter comes out every Tuesday and I call it Hello Tuesday. And it's all about things I know to be true. And I had this moment where I just got really annoyed about how everybody is so upset about the fact that women are ambitious. Like, God forbid women are ambitious. And I think it's so fascinating that we love women who are in positions of power, but we hate women who want power. And so I was like, you know what? I think we should talk about this word ambition. It's not a dirty word. Let's take back ambition.
What does the word ambition mean to you?
For me, ambition is just this question of, what do you want in your life? What are you hungry for? What do you want to do? And for some people, it's like the CEO suite in the corner office in the private parking spot. And for others, it's like being home to have dinner with your family every night. Like, it can be anything. And, we have this idea around purpose and calling, like we have to have this holier than thou thing. God forbid what you really want is just to be ambitious about making a ton of money. That's okay too, right? Like, no, there should not be purpose shaming. And I feel like, especially, and this is for men and women, but especially since we're talking about Women's History Month, this idea that women have to have a purpose that's family and that's, charity and that's all this other stuff. I think that reduces us to these stereotypes. And so for me, ambition is just really owning the thing that you want, whatever that thing might be.
And what is that for you? What is that thing that you want?
Well, it's interesting because at different points in my life, at different times and at different life stages, I have wanted different things. So when I was 21 years old, dropping out of law school to join a presidential campaign, I wanted to work in the White House, right? I wanted to be in the room where it happened. I wanted to be in the halls of power. Like, that was what I wanted. I didn't care if I was, being paid in all the idealism and ramen soup I could eat. I was totally cool with that. Like, I was getting paid in other ways. But, now as I just turned 51 and I've got, a kid in high school and a kid in college, and, I'm thinking about what the next stage is, my ambition's very different. I want to be able to make the kind of money where when I get on a plane, I know that I'm going to have an overhead space for my suitcase because I'm in first class, right? What I realized is that working in politics bought me like ramen soup and idealism, but that doesn't buy me 800 thread count sheets. And I've kind of grown into being a bit of a princess. So at this point in my life, I want to pick and choose my clients, and I want to get paid in ways that make it worth me getting out of my house and going and being on the road and having the jet lag and all the rest of the things. So, ambition for me is, can I make an impact on what matters to me? Am I making enough money that it's actually, justifying the time that I spend and the risk that I take in terms of, health and exhaustion and what I'm giving up? And do I have the kind of personal freedom and flexibility that I want to be able to show up for my kids, because they're not here that long, right? Like, my youngest is about to leave for college and my oldest who's in college. We just had a spring break together. I wanted to make sure I was there and available and fully present. So for me, ambition right now means this, but for you and for your listeners, it could mean a completely different thing right now than it did 10 years ago or 10 years from now.
Who were some of the women who influenced you growing up?
Oh, wow. I mean, I would have to say, of course, first, my mother, right? My mother was somebody who grew up in Brooklyn. I know you're Queens, but grew up in Brooklyn. and my father also grew up in Brooklyn, but my mom grew up in Brooklyn as a woman who, I think if she were born 30, 40 years later, probably would be running the world right now, right? This is an incredible, intelligent, smart, capable, powerful, organized, executive function type woman who went to college and was told you can be a nurse or a teacher. Like, those were the options that were available to her at the time. She, went on, got a master's degree, became a teacher, then raised my sister and I, and she got really sort of righteously indignant about the way that things were happening in the city where we grew up. And she decided to run for public office. She became a city councilor because she just couldn't not do it. And she's 5'9" and she'd wear 3-inch heels, and she'd stand right next to the men in her giant heels. And she would know every single rule about how things worked. And she would tell them exactly how things were going to go down. And she would intimidate them with her power, with her intelligence, with her passion, with her ambition. I then took a class in college from Sarah Weddington, who actually was the lawyer who argued Roe v. Wade in front of the Supreme Court. She recently passed away. She argued Roe v. Wade at the age of 27. And I got to take this very small leadership seminar with her. And she told us on the very first day, she did not get that case because she was the smartest lawyer in Texas. She didn't get that case because she was the most well-funded lawyer in Texas. In fact, back then in the 70s, they weren't hiring lady lawyers in Texas. So she went to go work for public assistance. And when she was working at this public assistance law nonprofit, in walks Jane Roe. And she said, the way that we won that case is that I learned every single rule. And I figured out how things worked. And I got to dance circles around those cowboy booted lawyers at the Supreme Court. And so this idea of learning the rules and understanding how the game is played so that you can then, run the chessboard, for me was super influential. And I think everything that I did after that.
We're talking with Laura Gassner Otting this morning here at 105.5 WDHA on the Jersey Magazine. Your book, Limitless, you talk about that. The full title is How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life. There it is on the video screen. What if one of those people that you should ignore is yourself? Because we are sometimes our own worst enemy.
In fact, that is often the person that you have to ignore. We tell ourselves these lies and we say things like, oh my God, I might fail. Okay, well, so you might, fine. But the lie that we tell ourselves is, I might fail, I'm going to die. It's all going to be over. And, there's a line in my book where I talk about how failure is not finale, it's fulcrum. And one time I was giving this talk and it was a very impressive audience. And I said, failure is not finale. So where you learn and you grow and you change and you iterate and you innovate. Failure is not finale, it's fulcrum. And then I looked stage left and there was an astronaut. And that astronaut had been on not 1, not 2, but 3 spacewalks. And I was like, except for you. So for the rest of us, as long as there is blood in your veins and oxygen in your lungs, failure is not finale, it's fulcrum. So the lie we tell ourselves is that failure is going to be the end of everything. So we have to not tell ourselves that lie. The next lie we tell ourselves is that, the people won't like us when we want to be the person who we want to be. And actually that's maybe true, but the lie is that, those are the people who matter, right? We're giving votes to people in our lives who shouldn't even have voices. So what do we do if somebody doesn't approve of who we are? Well, maybe it's because they liked us better when we were smaller, because they felt bigger because we were smaller. Maybe it's because they're so afraid of us doing well that it reflects on whether or not they're not taking their own chances. Maybe they're just scared. Jim, there's so many people who say things like, oh my God, you're going to do what? You can't do that. That's too scary. And what they really mean is, I could never do that because I'm too scared. And so we run into people at the line at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or wherever, and they tell us not to go ahead with our big hopes and dreams. And then we hear it and it nestles into our brain like a little cancerous cell. And then as soon as something goes wrong, we're like, oh, they were right. I shouldn't do this. And so all of the people in our lives, whether they were teachers when we were young or parents or bosses or the Kardashians or whoever's telling us what success needs to look like, I mean, maybe for them, but not for us. And so we have to allow ourselves this grace at every age and at every life stage, which I think is like every 7 years or so. We change, the world changes, the people living in our house change. What, there's a global pandemic, who the hell knows? Things happen. About every 7 years or so, we should stop and say, well, that's what success meant to me before. Does it still mean success to me now? Do I still want to be doing those same things? And it's okay to change. And the last thing I'll say is my favorite quote from another fellow New Yorker, Eleanor Roosevelt, is, we would worry much less about what other people thought about us if we realized how seldomly they did. The truth is, nobody's paying that much attention. We don't matter. Nobody cares. They're not looking that closely, right? So it's okay to change what you're doing, to shift your definition, to decide to take a U-turn or a right turn or a left turn. Jim, in 20 years of doing executive search, the most interesting people, in fact, the only interesting people I talked to were the ones who made these massive shifts in their life. So let's be interesting. Let's change things. And that starts with saying, like, it's okay that I believed something before and I believe something different now. That's called evolving. That's called intelligence. That's called courage. So let's do that.
Laura Gassner Otting, my guest this morning on the Jersey Magazine here at 105.5 WDHA. There are two blog entries, and it kind of goes back to what you were just talking about. There are two blog entries I want to ask you about. One is your high school bully, and I want you to tell that story because there's no way I can do it justice, but it's a fascinating story. And I think whether it happened in high school or not, it's something every single one of us has gone through at some point or another, Laura.
So yes, my high school bully. So about 6 months ago, I got a Facebook message from somebody saying, hey, I'm going to be in Boston next week. Would love to grab a drink with you. And normally you get a Facebook message and you're like, oh, cool, whatever. But I got this one and like ice shot through my veins because this was the kid in high school who made my life a living hell. Like, you know, that kid, when you just hear their voice from like down the hall or around the corner, you're just like, how do I get out of here? How do I run so fast the other direction? Because I know it's going to be bad. I'm going to get shoved in a locker. I'm going to be called something. He's going to pick that one thing that I'm super insecure about and just needle it until I feel like just a pile of dirt, right? That was this kid. And he was like the ringleader of a bunch of other like underlings. It was like Draco Malfoy, right? I mean, he was just like this horrible, horrible person. And he was just awful. And I saw this message and I was like, well, I have a choice. I could either say no and let this kid continue to live 30 years later rent-free in my head, or I could just go. Now, Jim, to be fair, I had just finished running the Boston Marathon. I was in incredible physical shape. I'm doing really well. My book is a Washington Post bestseller. I've been on the Today Show. I've been on Good Morning America. Like, I was feeling pretty good about myself. So I was like, if there's ever a time I'm going to like go face to face with my high school bully, I'm going to like show up like, I got this. Look at me. And look how good I turned out, right? That's the reason we go to our high school reunions, right? Like, nobody goes if they feel like crap about themselves. They go if they feel awesome. So I was like, well, he's not been to any of our high school reunions. I've been to all of them because like I was a pretty late bloomer. So, you know, I wanted to come back and show them that I did okay. So I walk into the bar and I see him and he looks tired. He looks haggard. He looks old. And my first thought was like, yeah, awesome. And then I was like, God, I probably look tired and haggard and all too. We're all 50. So I sit down and before we can even start talking, he says, Laura, I want to say something that I wanted to say for the last 30 years. And meanwhile, I'm like, my heart is racing. I'm palpitating. I've got like the bead of sweat going down the back of my neck. And he's like, I want to say I'm sorry. And I was like, do what now? Like, what? I'm sorry, what? And he's like, I was really cruel to you in high school. He said, and I don't want to make an excuse and I don't want to, I don't want you to forgive me. He's like, I just need to tell you why. And he proceeded to explain to me a story about what happened in his life in high school and how abusive his father was and how he would come home and he would get ground into dirt every single day, emotionally, sometimes physically. And he left high school and he joined the Marines and he went off to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan, not because, I thought he went because he wanted to like go kill people because he was just a jerk, right? He was just this horrible physical bully of a person and he wanted to like go be aggressive. Turns out he wanted to go fight in war because war was better than his home where he'd been growing up. And I had no idea. And as he explained the story to me, I said, I didn't know anything about this. And I wish I did. And I'm sorry that I didn't see that either. I said, but we're all so wrapped up in who we are and what's happening inside of us that we don't even realize that there are things that are happening to other people that are affecting the way that they approach us, that have nothing to do with us at all. And yet we take the insults and the slings and the arrows and we're like, oh, that's definitional to me. I must be less than because they're telling me that I'm terrible. When in fact, really they're feeling themselves so terrible that that's the only way they can have any power in their lives whatsoever. And, at the end of this drink, which turned into like 3 drinks because we went pretty deep, I think, he did not want my forgiveness. He would not take my forgiveness. But I think in the end, we both left with a new friend.
Have you spoken with him since?
I haven't spoken with him since, but we've been on, he's like commented on some Facebook things of mine, and like we follow each other on social media, and it's it's I'm not talking to him in the back of my head anymore. And I think that's really the key. Even though I didn't realize that he had been living in my head rent free all this time, I think we all carry trauma from our childhoods, whether it's like hunger or abuse or fears or anything like that. Or maybe it's just these like little tiny like drip of bullying or of insecurity that affects who we are as grownups. I once saw this cartoon that showed this person like trying to be like a real live adult, and inside it was just like like a little kid like standing on top of a stool with a giant trench coat wrapped around him so you couldn't see the stool, and he just like was trying to pretend to be an adult. And I think sometimes that a lot of us go around life trying to pretend to be adults, which is why, in my book, Limitless, How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path and Live Your Best Life, I say to people, like, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to be somebody different. It's okay to change the people around you if you can't change the people around you, right? Like it's totally fine to decide to move past where you were, to move forward towards something else.
Laura Gassner Otting, my guest this morning on the Jersey Magazine here at 105.5 WDHA. When I reached out to Laura to invite her to come on the show, her response in the email referenced dressing like a rock chick, dressing like Lita Ford back in the 80s. So I know where you're coming from. And the other blog entry that I wanted to ask you about, I have a feeling that no one on the planet enjoys what he does for a living the way Dave Grohl does.
Yes.
I've never met Dave. I've had Dave's mom on the show. I haven't had Dave yet, but the blog entry about your fantasy is the wrong word because it sounds kind of erotic, and that's not really what's going on here. But your blog entry about Dave Grohl was really, really wonderful.
Oh, this was the one where I was talking about the joy that he takes in the work that he does. And there was like a 12-year-old girl, I think, was drumming. He found somebody sent him a YouTube video, I think, of this girl like drumming to I think maybe it was Everlong. I can't remember which song it was. And he invited her to like come to the tour and to drum along with them. And what I think was amazing was that I think that he knew she was good, like he'd seen like a little piece of it or something, but I think he had no idea just exactly how good she was. And so like she starts going, and you can see that he's just like, holy crap, right? And then she keeps going, and he starts singing, and then she does the solo, and he's like on stage, and he's having like it's like a fever dream. He's having like a meltdown of ecstasy. He's like, he cannot believe what is happening to this person, that this young girl is doing behind him. And he's just, what I think is so cool about Dave Grohl is like, that's not original, right? Then there's this like guy, like he Kiss guy, right? The guy who's like all dressed up with the Kiss makeup, and he gets on and he's like, Kiss dude, hey man, I see you back there. He goes, come on stage. You want to play with me? Guy comes on stage and he just starts cranking it out. And it's just, and Dave is just like he just does not hold back, where he just is like, I mean, I don't know if I can curse on the show or not, so I'm not going to, but it's like,
you probably shouldn't, since we do have the FCC rules.
Right. So he's like, the stream of obscenities comes out of his mouth. Like he cannot believe it. It is like joy and elation. And like, if there was like a light beam that could come out of his body, it would just like light up the entire universe. To do something that you love and to find somebody else who loves it too, and just to be so fully geeked out about that, like that, I think is totally the dream. And what is neat about Dave, I think also, Dave said something many years ago that really stuck with me, where he was complaining about like American Idol. And he was saying, and I know this isn't specifically the blog post, so people can come to my blog at heylgo.com and they can go and they can find the specifics. But what I love, like he was complaining about American Idol, and he was saying that rock and roll is ruined. Like it used to be that you had to like sit with your friends in their garage for hours and hours and hours and work and work and work. And now you can just go and like stand outside of a warehouse studio, try out. If somebody likes how you sing, you like get on television. And he's like, that's not what rock and roll is. Like rock and roll should be hard and dirty and grungy and running around in the back of a van all over the country and like eating, cold pizza and eating like leftover hot dogs from behind the 7-Eleven, questionable date of expiration. And he talks about how he did this in his book and how he worked and he grew and he took chances and he took risks and sometimes things didn't work out so well. And what I love about it is that we're told so often now to follow our passion, right? Like we have these like Instafluencer models with their perfectly beach waved hair and their flower crowns and they're like looking out over Coachella or something and they're like, follow your passion. Like as soon as you find your passion and follow it, everything's going to be perfect, peachy keen, hunky dory. And the truth is that's not how it works. Right? Like if Dave Grohl went to follow his passion and the first time he got rejected from a band or the first time he dropped his drumstick, he would have been like, oh, I guess this isn't my passion. It's not working out. But he knows that you have to invest in your passion and work for your passion and let your passion beat the crap out of you before you can actually get good at it. And Jim, what I love about Dave is that he knows that his passion is worth that effort. And he loves seeing other people who have put in the work to be able to be at the top of their game also.
I think if you were to take the title of your book, his face would be right there because
I think so too.
Yeah. Right.
I think so too. And I will say, just to make yet another plug for his book is really, really good.
Yes, it is.
His audiobook is even better. So I read the book and then I was training. This is actually when I was training for one of the marathons and I needed to go on a long run. So I downloaded the audiobook also. And I started listening to the audiobook about a third of the way through the book. And I actually went back and started it all over again and just listened to the whole thing because to listen to him tell the story and to hear his voice and to hear him, so emotional and so excited and so down and just to really relive the moments. What a gift to all of us that he gave us.
Read his mom's book too, if you haven't already. It's a really fascinating book. And you get to hear some of the stories from mom's perspective that he tells in his book.
That would be great. Because that book is a love letter to his mother. And, as a mom of two boys, of course, I also love that.
Laura, for WDHA listeners who want to learn more about you and Limitless and all of that, tell us where they can go.
Yeah, so my name is Laura Gassner Otting, and all my friends call me LGO. So I'm on all the socials at LGO.com. And you can also get to my website at heylgo.com. And if you want to check out my blog posts or there's a quick assessment that you can take to figure out, how to ignore everybody, carve your own path and live your best life, you can do that also at heylgo.com.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, Laura.
Thanks, Jim. It's been my pleasure.